Strangely, I can see Michael and Fiona agreeing to an alliance where, in exchange for eternal beauty, immortality, and the supremacy, Fiona agrees to do all of Michael's bidding, and Michael, on the other hand, gains the Supreme, who's the most powerful witch in the world. And this is why I say that if Fiona had to face the Antichrist instead of the witch hunters as her threat to the coven, she would really struggle, if not fail completely. And I say this because the Antichrist would be able to offer her something that's very enticing to her, which is that eternal youth and possibly the supremacy. And based on what we see in American Horror Story Season 3, none of what Fiona did after stepping back into Miss Robichaux's is indicative of somebody who is willing to sacrifice themselves fully for the world or her coven. Keep in mind, before the Antichrist was even a viable threat, Fiona was twice willing to sell her soul. The first time to the Axeman and the second time to Papa Legba. Additionally, this is the same woman who would unalive anyone she thought threatened her supremacy. And for the Antichrist, this would make her a very valuable asset as somebody who would be completing these tasks even without the incentive of true immortality. And then for Fiona, this would make her a credible resource because she's already got the track record of unaliving and doing things for herself and selfish gain. But there is one thing that makes me think that maybe our girl Fiona would give up her selfishness in an attempt to save the coven and the world. And ironically, that thing is her ego. The thing she'd be willing to unalive people for is the thing that she'd be willing to be unalived for. And I do think at her core, Fiona does want to be seen as a good supreme, especially as she starts to contend with the fact that her reign is ending inevitably. I also think that she would probably find it entertaining that she would be immortalized by the fact that she died fighting the Antichrist, which is something no witch in her coven would have the benefit of doing. Additionally, I think this is also why that Fiona, in her absence, left the coven under Cordelia's care, because she knew that the only person in the world she could trust with the coven was her daughter, because she knew she would take care of it in a way that Fiona was either unwilling to or incapable of doing. Additionally, I think it's also important to point out how she treated the threats to the coven in Season 3. Now, it's Fiona's behavior towards threats in Season 3 that ultimately make me say that Fiona would be willing to sacrifice herself or other people for her coven. And I say this because usually when dealing with the threat, especially an outside threat, which is something she does not tolerate at all, she deals with it swiftly and brutally. And we see this in the case with the cops as well as the witch hunters more specifically. And I think if Fiona were to deal with Michael one-on-one, it would possibly be one of the bloodiest battles in American Horror Story Season 3. Or 8, I guess, depending. Or I could see her coming up with some spell out of nowhere to defeat him, or at least bind him until a later date when a more powerful Supreme could ascend. Because again, Fiona's greatest gift does not lie in her abilities, it lies in her discernment and her abilities to use her gifts wisely and intelligently. But I do think, as far as the Antichrist goes, Fiona was a more formidable opponent for him, because at the time she was self-assured, confident, and willing to sacrifice without any givings, unlike Fiona would likely be able to do. But anyways, I love this question. Please leave your thoughts in the comments, and I want to ask you guys, how do you think Fiona would deal with Michael? And I hope to see you guys in my next video.